My name is John Morgan. Forbes recently named me a billionaire after I started the largest personal injury law firm in America. This is everything I'm authorized to tell you. I don't like to say I'm a billionaire. When I started out as a lawyer, I was driving around in a Nissan Maxima with a sunroof and the leather package, and I felt like, here I am. Today, I have 7,000 people at Morgan & Morgan, 1,400 lawyers. Nobody's going to outwork me. My life is really not a billionaire's life. The only thing that makes it a billionaire's life is the way I travel. And I have a G5. That's the ultimate luxury. Other than that, I do have houses, but they're not the houses you would think. My house in Hawaii is very nice, but I don't think it's a billionaire's house. The house I live in here, it's big, it's nice, but built it a long time ago. I built a bunch of houses for me and all my children at Ponce Inlet, which is 40 minutes from here on the beach. I have a house in New Hampshire. And I started going to Maui, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. It's like if heaven was a place, it'd be Maui. It's like the air was just born. Everything's brighter. Everything's vibrant. There's whales coming out of the water. It's like you're like in Jurassic Park in your backyard. My wife and I were driving around looking at houses. There was a house under construction. We pulled up and we looked at it, and I said, "What do you think?" Because it wasn't very expensive. I mean, it was expensive, but it wasn't expensive, and it was $6 million. Beautiful. 6,000 square foot, 5 acres. Listen, I get high every single night in Maui. I float to sleep. So if you're out there, fellas, guys, everybody, come see me. We'll smoke a joint and drink some rosé. I grew up in Kentucky, and I like simpler food, for example. I'd be just as happy with, to dinner for tonight if I had cube steak smothered in onions and fried potatoes and cabbage. I'm like, do you want filet mignon? No, I'll do this. I'll choose this. So I get to eat cheap too, because that stuff doesn't cost that much. So that's lucky. My clothes, I walk in my closet. I'm like, will I ever buy another shirt? Will I ever buy another pair of shorts? Maybe, just on vacation. But but not really. There's nothing really that I want. And that's a good thing. I mean, here's my week. This Friday, I'm going to go to Keeneland, to Lexington, where I grew up. I now own racehorses, so I'm going to see my racehorses run. The following week, I'm going to go cut a commercial with John Daly in Arkansas, and then I'm going to fly to Del Mar to see one of my horses run in the Breeders' Cup, and then I'm going to have some fun in California. Then I'm going to come back. I don't own a whole horse. I own like 25% or 50%. I do a deal with these guys who own American Pharoah and Justify, so I breed my mares to Pharaoh. So I get a Pharaoh colt or filly every year. I haven't lost that much money, but I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. And, can you imagine growing up poor in a city and then coming back and owning racehorses in that city? So I got a lot of nice things, but it's not like, the houses are already paid off. There's not really money going out now. I spend about $2 million a year living, and most of it is insurance and upkeep of my homes. And, like these dogs that travel with me, I never leave without the dogs. To live exactly what I'm living now, if I had 50 million, 4%, 2 million tax-free, and not the jet, then I'm okay. I have always told my children to say we're comfortable. But they used to ask that my kids would come and say, "But people ask us if we're rich." What? I said, "You just tell them we're comfortable," and that's all they need to say, because they were comfortable. And look, if you have 100 million or 1 billion, you're basically living the same life. Before I went to law school, I sold Yellow Pages for 18 months and I made a load of money. I was one of the greatest, if not the greatest Yellow Page seller in the history of AT&T. I could just sell it because I believed in it. You know, the Yellow Pages with Google back then. And so I made money, was able to go back to law school. When I graduated from law school, all I applied was to personal injury firms because I knew what I wanted to do. You know, I'd made like almost $70,000 selling Yellow Pages. My first job doing personal injury, I had a $10,000 base and a 10% of whatever I would close. And I think my first year I made like $15,000. 1982. And then the next year I made 32,000. And the next year I left and started my own firm. I started my own firm in 85. Advertising was just starting with lawyers. There was a Supreme Court case called Bates versus Arizona in 1977 that allowed lawyers to advertise. Up until that time, lawyers could not advertise, even though we had a First Amendment. Bates versus Arizona said, look, the First Amendment applies to this commercial speech. Sometimes you can just see the future. And I saw it. So it was still very verboten to advertise as a lawyer. You're like, my God, you're a lawyer and you're advertising? That's so beneath you. And it kind of was. I was embarrassed about it because the people who were advertising were the people who were kind of and the people who weren't advertising were the good lawyers. I went and borrowed $100,000. Remember the flipping the coin? And so is it going to work or is it? I don't know. I've thought many times, what happened if that $100,000 had not turned into some cases? What would have happened to me? I don't know. That was just a left turn that worked out. I was so embarrassed that I had a friend of mine who's one of my best friends. He owns a bunch of Cadillac dealerships now in Sarasota, Manatee. And he was real good looking. And I said, you know, I'm not good looking. So I said, you know what? I had Vance do my first commercials. But then what happened is the Florida bar mandated that if you were advertising, you couldn't have someone else. You had to do it. And then reluctantly, I had to take, you know, my fat face, which I've always felt like my face is fat, and I couldn't use Vance anymore. So then I had to be the face. And when I look at those ads now, I'm like, who the was calling this kid? With advertising, you know, it was just a total paradigm shift. I mean, now I'm talking to everybody. They weren't great cases, but the phone was ringing. If I started today, I wouldn't be John Morgan. I had it all to myself. I didn't have competition. Today, you know, I have 7,000 people at Morgan & Morgan, 1,400 lawyers. I'm in all 50 states. We have 100 to 200 trials on the docket a week. What I kept doing because I was young, and this is what a lot of people make a mistake, is I kept feeding expansion out of my profits. I didn't want a boat. I didn't want a plane. I just wanted to grow. I was in Orlando and I was doing well. But then I started thinking, well, am I hitting diminishing returns? In other words, could I get more money if I took this money and went to Tampa? And so I went to Tampa. I used to call it the teacups. When the teacups seemed to be pouring over, when I seemed to be thinking I was at diminishing returns, I go to another city. That's why I bought my partners out. They wanted to keep the money. And I said, why don't I just buy you all out? They go, okay. I got a call one day and my receptionist says, Johnny Cochran's on the phone. So I pick up the phone. Hey, John, what is Johnny Cochran? This is Johnny Cochran calling you from Los Angeles, California. Hey, man, how you doing? I'm like, who the is punking me right now? I mean, this can't be Johnny Cochran. And he's telling me that he was going to start his own firm and that he had heard that I was a marketing genius and would I be interested in helping him with the Cochran firm. And I was so convinced it wasn't really Johnny Cochran. I said, give me a number. I'll call you back. I go, okay, man, listen, I'm getting ready to go to New York. I have a condo right above the Russian tea room. And I'm like, oh, he just called me. So he gives me the number. So when I hung up from him, when I hung up from Johnny, I called the number in New York City, and the answering machine, I'll never forget it. It's his voice. It's the greatest answering machine of all time. Voice message. Hi, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. If you decide to give up that right, leave your name and number at the sound of the tone. I'm like, it's Johnny Cochran. I threw in with him, which kind of exposed me to doing things nationally. We were in Memphis and DC and LA and New York. And so when I got with Cochran, I was outside of my comfort zone. And we had a lot of fun. We grew the business. I have two things that go on my tombstone, one of the other. Grow or die, or nothing is about today, everything's about tomorrow. Those are the two guiding principles of my business life. Grow or die is very important to me. So I just kept growing so I wouldn't die. There are certain people that are born with an entrepreneurial seed. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't just do law. I have attractions and hotels and shopping centers and those types of things. But I'm always looking for opportunity. A lot of people see these things and go, why bother? Well, if you say why bother and don't bother, you end up sitting at your desk eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich by yourself. Being a paper boy, being a paper girl is the ultimate enterprise because you're little, you're small, but you got to be up every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You got to go deliver those papers in the snow and the sleet and the rain and the heat, whatever. When my kids were little, I used to go to the science center. I was like, these science centers are the kids didn't like them. Nobody liked them. I go, here's what's missing in science centers. They should be interactive. Touch and feel and doing. That's what I'll do. I'm going to build an attraction. I'm going to build a science center, but I'm going to turn it upside down, called WonderWorks. That was 1997. And today I have 6 of them and an EBITDA of 33 million with no debt. I built a small little theme park on I-Drive out of here called Magical Midway. And I had multi-level go-kart tracks and rides and stuff. But my mistake was I didn't have enough parking. I thought because I was so close to all the hotels that I didn't need parking. Thank God that I had one ride that basically carried the whole thing, this thrill ride. And I was able to sell the park and lose $1 million. That didn't work. At one time, I owned a lot of Marriott hotels. Why did I keep building Marriott hotels? Money. To make money. And I have these attractions. Why do I have them all over the country? To make money. And I enjoy business. I don't hunt. So I never understood hunting. I really don't understand fishing. That's where most people off. And they call it recreation. To me, it's total boredom. I hunt money. Nobody's ever built an attraction for Crime and Punishment, really. So I built an attraction that I call Alcatraz East in Pigeon Forge. It looks like a 1980s prison. And I have all this memorabilia. It's a history of crime and punishment. When you get to the end, the grand finale is Ted Bundy's VW, John Dillinger's sedan, Bonnie and Clyde death car from the movie, OJ's Bronco, John Bonet's bicycle, and I just recently got the Murdoch golf cart from the murders. It takes people 3.5, 4 hours to go through this thing. And it prints money. I'm giving America what they want. And by the way, if you're offended, stay the out. Before, I was out hustling business. When I worked for the phone company, I was a member of the union. I joined, I thought I might go into politics. So I joined CWA, AFL-CIO. So when I got out, I spent a lot of time in union halls at meetings, and then we go out drinking, throwing darts, shooting pool. And these union people were sending me their business. So I was getting tons of business because I'm a union guy. I'm AFL-CIO. And so plumbers, pipe fitters, bricklayers, hotel, motel. And these are the people I'd rather be with. I to this day, I don't like walking in a country club. I feel like I don't belong. But I do belong in a pool room with a cocktail.
Are you any good?
In pool? No. But I'm good at the cocktails. If I went out back in the day, if I went out and got drunk and went to bed at 4 o'clock, but had a 6 o'clock breakfast, I was at the 6 o'clock breakfast. I might have been reeking of ketosis, but I was at the breakfast. I show up. And so, it keeps you hungry. I consider myself a catastrophic thinker. I feel like this could all disappear in a minute. And it's still with me. I've had dreams where I've lost everything, and it's a recurring dream. I'm out in an old car, and I'm out of money, and I'm almost out of money, but I'm not out of money, and I don't know how I'm going to make it, and I'm just out there. And then I wake up, and it was a dream. And you're happy to wake up because you're back here instead of back there. Every morning I wake up and get numbers. I get numbers from my attendance and at my attractions. I get numbers from new cases signed up the day before. I get all sorts of leaderboard reports. There's two emotions, the emotion of winning and the emotion of losing. The emotion of winning is powerful, but the emotion of losing is like this. To give you an example, if you walk out of this room and you find $1,000 in an envelope, you're gonna be like, wow, that's an emotion. Nobody's money. Oh, it's mine. But if you go to your hotel room when you get back and the safe is open and the $1,000's missing, you're going to turn this city upside down. You're going to be, the cops are coming. I mean, your day is the emotion of losing, the emotion of winning. The power of both is totally different. So when I lost, I was very upset. Some people are born lazy, and we get mad at them, but it's not their fault. I say it all the time. A lion is born, he's king. A sloth is born, he's all he did was be born. Just can't get out of bed, can't get out of the tree. Comes down the tree once a day just to and go back over, collapse. I'm a lion. And listen, everybody wants to be a lion until it's time to do lion. And lion is taking down the gazelle, ripping the carcass open, taking the meat out, face bloody, take the food back to the pride. I'm also someone who has what they call imposter syndrome. In other words, I don't know how this happened, and I'm going to be found out one day. They're going to find out that I really didn't know what the F I was doing, but I'm still pretending like I'm doing it. It's weird. But it's also good because when I found catastrophic thinking and imposter syndrome, it made sense that I was an only the paranoid survive guy. I believe luck has had an incredible amount to do with what happened to me. Life is 1,000 left turns, 1,000 right turns, 1,000 U-turns. And a lot of times those turns come when you're just at the stoplight and you flip a coin. It's not like you knew where you were going, you just went right instead of left. But one different turn could have changed everything. And I'm not arrogant enough to not understand how many times I flipped a coin to go left or go right and ended up here. So I think it's helpful because I think when people start making money, They think they're not a lot smarter than they actually are. And that arrogance is how they lose. But I also understand this, that you don't find luck unless you're looking for luck. My leadership style is this. I understand that you can't buy time, but you need time. So how do you get time? If you can't buy it, how do you get it? You get it by finding people in your organization that emerge, that just emerge. And you go, there's something about that guy. There's something about that gal. There's something. They are send delete people. They are people that I send something to and I delete it and I don't think about it again because I know it's going to be done. And then I test it by delegating a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. I then ruthlessly delegate. This is your job. This is your job. This is your job. This is your job. And I know it's done because they're send delete people. And you know what that has given me? Time. Time to do the strategic things that I want to do for the law firm. Once you learn to scale and delegate, then you get what you can't buy, which is time. My childhood was good until it wasn't good. Both of my parents ended up having bad drinking problems. And I was the oldest of 5. And my dad lost, every job possible. It was one of these, you come home, as cars in the driveway, you're like, here we go again. I didn't have a bad childhood. I had a great childhood. I had a huge paper route. So I always had my own money. And then ultimately my dad ran out of opportunities and had to take a job. We moved when I was 14. And then when we moved, that's when I understood that we were financially insecure. And because the house we'd been in was a house that my grandmother had died and left us money to move in, so it was nice. And now you're in Florida. But it was real. It's like, okay, we're not financially secure. And then it went downhill from there. Our mother finally left. My dad kept drinking, but we kept moving on. But the great gift that my dad gave us was every time he would get fired, I'd walk in, he'd be sitting at the table, stocking feet, want ads. This is when there were want ads. And he would say these words: whatever you do, be a professional. Nobody can fire you. And it was seared in my mind that I was going to do something where nobody could fire me. I wasn't going to be in his position. The big part of my life was when my brother Tim was 18. He was paralyzed in a diving accident as a lifeguard at Walt Disney World. And that injury is what changed all of our lives and what made me go into personal injury. I didn't know what a personal injury lawyer was until Tim got hurt. But I was a sophomore at the University of Florida. My dad called me up. He said, Tim's been in a diving accident, lifeguard. He's paralyzed. He can't move anything from his head down. We were poor. So when you're poor in the medicals, when you're poor, it's a bad place to be, whether you're trying to get medical help or legal help. So you're vulnerable. To be powerless, hopeless, helpless is the worst feelings in the world. Then you walk into the hospital and your brother's on a gurney spinning 360. And you look at him and you're like, how the are we going to get out of this? He was injured on the job. It was a contentious deal with Disney. Disney was became the enemy because they were the ones trying to fight Tim for his benefits or claim or whatever. And he hurt himself trying to rescue. They thought a little girl had drowned in the Polynesian lagoon, and they treated him like the Taliban. And they just litigated, and I became enraged. And I said to myself, I said to everybody then, I'm going to come back one day and I know what I'm going to do now. And it was just very crystal clear.
Disney was a big enemy.
Disney was a big enemy just because the way they treated him, you know. And then I saw, you know, there's so many Tims out there because most of us are helpless, hopeless, and powerless. You know, when I met with the doctor, when Tim was being discharged, I said, what's the prognosis? And he said, if he lives to 30, I'll be surprised. And I said, wrong. From that day forward to this day today, my life has been inextricably linked to Tim's injury. He passed away last summer.
I'm sorry to hear that, Pete.
65. And he worked with me every day.
Oh, man.
The good thing about all the bad that happened to me is it made me more empathetic, more compassionate, and I think more caring. And I think that has been a benefit to me and my business. There's so many Tims out there because most of us are helpless, hopeless, and powerless. You know, 40% of us don't have $400 in the bank. 60% of us do live paycheck to paycheck. You know, when I made all this money, that's why years ago I spent my own money to raise the minimum wage in Florida to $15 an hour. Then I passed the minimum wage. They all told me that wouldn't happen. I passed that with 60-some% of the vote. Income inequality is what will take this country down. At the end of the day, I don't care what civilization you're talking about. At the end of the day, people finally have enough and they just come and take it. The minimum wage, the federal minimum wage is $8 an hour. It's in our best interest to pay people more so they don't come and take it. So even the $15 an hour that I've done in Florida, still not enough. Spent the same amount of money twice to legalize medical marijuana in Florida because that's what gave Tim relief. It was just so crazy that here's this plant that's put into earth by God for us and it works. And we're going to say you can't have it. I took some of my money and tried to do good with it based on, you know, my life experiences and Tim's. And me and Tim barnstormed the state and passed. They told me that it would never pass, and I passed medical marijuana the second time with 73% of the vote. I've got some free clinics that I support around the state of Florida. I'm building right now a women and children's pavilion for the homeless in Orlando. They need health care too. Health care should be a civil right. Just because you're rich doesn't mean you should be the one that lives and the ones that are poor have to die. Every day I'm David versus a Goliath. I'm Goliath in my space, but I'm not Goliath compared to who I fight against. Remember, I'm in the opioid litigation for 10 years now. I've represented states and cities. I'm on the big team in Cleveland. I was on the BP oil team when the spill happened in the Gulf. I represent the fires in Hawaii. I settled that case for $4 billion. Where I live is Lahaina. That's where the fire burned everything. Those are my neighbors. I represented black farmers and I recovered $1.2 billion for black farmers who were discriminated against in the 50s and 60s. You know, last week my son got a $11 million verdict against Target. They'd offered us $200,000. Target's a Goliath. I see myself as a David because I do have finite funds. I can only spend so much on these cases. Like, you know, a big case can cost, you know, millions of dollars just in cost, and I don't get paid till the end. I still haven't got paid on opioids in a lot of these cases. I've sued tobacco so many times for what they've done to us that, you know, this tobacco industry is in the business of premeditated murder. Premeditated murder. They call new smokers replacement smokers. They know what they were doing. They laced their cigarettes with additives to hook us as kids. They gave cigarettes away to children. They gave cigarettes away to servicemen because they knew they would hook us. They come up with a filter. They go, oh, we got a filter. That's gonna solve all your problems. Look at this brown stuff. See, it's the tar and nicotine. You're like, oh, good. No, that's not stopping anything. It's what they do. They spray a chemical on the cotton that when it gets hot, it turns brown, and you think it's. But they're in the business of killing people. That's their business. They know that all these people are going to die from lung cancer. And so, but they have so much money. And when I try the case against the tobacco industry, they take me all the way to the United States Supreme Court. When they come to try a case against us, they take a whole hotel down. When they bring their witnesses, they have people who go pick up the witness and bring them to the trial and take them back. It's like a Grisham novel. And they have unlimited money because it's a public company. And that's why I'm David. And that's why they're Goliath. A lot of these cases take years and years and years. So in a sense, I am David because they have unlimited money. And the insurance companies can get more. They just raise your rates and fill their coffers back. I can't do that. I have to win every single day. I got to keep winning every single day. It seems like that's the new thing. It seems like everybody's a billionaire. If you know what you're worth, you're not worth. And it's true. Eat the rich.
Eat the rich.
I would say I understand where you're coming from. I understand it because I've been it. I've been you. I've been in places where I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I didn't know how I was going to make it. I've been up against the wall. And it's a terrible feeling. You know, what I talked about earlier, the hopeless, helpless, powerless. It's like, where do I go? I would tell them to keep peacefully demonstrating. The no kings thing they had. I didn't see that coming. That there's all that many people that are upset. I didn't think anybody was that upset. But I also understand that there's a limit. I'm not a democratic socialist because I don't believe socialism works. I believe what works would be compassionate capitalism, where we try to do the most for the most with the least. We kind of just take care of them. The arguments that piss me off were the people who say, hey, I don't want to pay $1 more for a hamburger. I'm like, you selfish. Why? Why? And then they would say, well, if you raise the prices, then the wages you're going to need more because the prices, if you raise wages, then prices are going to have to be raised, and it's going to be an endless battle, an endless circle of people suffering, which I don't buy. I think at a certain point, people make enough money that they can have happiness. My 3 children are lawyers, work for me. My son, Matt, is unbelievable. My daughter has a structured settlement company called Monarch that structures settlements. And my son-in-law works there. And why is because I love them and I want to be with them. And that's why I built all the houses together at the beach. That's what moves me is my family and being with them. I would not understand life without them. And now I got all these grandchildren. We always used to go to see movies on Christmas Day. And we went to see this movie called My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And at the end of the movie, they were all living on the same street. The families were. And then the lights go up and my daughter goes, oh my God, look, Daddy's crying. Look at everybody. Daddy's crying about the movie. I'm like, shut the. But that movie, I was like, that'd be a great thing for all of us to live on the same street. What I never did is like these rich people buy their kids great cars. I never did. You know, I gave them like a 8-year-old Navigator, and they had to work, and they had to pay for their insurance. Now, look, they live my lifestyle. So, you know, if I'm at the Four Seasons, they're at the Four Seasons. So there's a, you know, how do you do it? But first of all, you got to spend a lot of time talking to them about what's important. One time it was Christmas time, and I said to them, the boys, I said, one was 17, one was 15. I said, have you all got your schedule for WonderWorks for this Christmas break? And Mike goes, nobody from Bishop Moore's working over Christmas. I go, that's, and Matt goes, no, nobody's working. Nobody's working. I said, I know that's not true. No, it's true, Daddy. I go, here's why it's not true. You two are working. You two MFers are working, and you're going to work 40 hours. But here's the good news. Because I own it, you can work from 8 to 5, 12 to 9, 5 to 2, but you're working. You don't have to work on Christmas Day because I own it. If I didn't own it, you might have to work on Christmas Day. But there will be people from Bishop Moore working this Christmas, Mike Morgan and Matt Morgan. And, you know, I had to fire Dan once. He was just a screw off at WonderWorks, and they thought he was the father's son. And I said, hey, man, you're fired. And I said, and you're not going out until you get a new job. Now you got to go get a new job. Well, I said, Dan. So he gets a job at Boston Market, you know, cooking chickens or something. He comes in like a week later, he quit Boston Market. I said, why'd you quit? They had me washing dishes. It made me vomit. I said, really? I said, I thought you were supposed to be cooking chicken. No, they had me dishwashing. I said, think about that, Dan. They got you doing the worst job in the place. That's what they think of you. And now you've quit. But here's another thing, Dan. You're never going out of this house except to school to look for a job. And then he got a job at Firehouse Sub, and he excelled at Firehouse Sub. It's interesting because I was always very envious and kind of like pissed off that people had money just born. You're like, that doesn't seem fair. And nepotism I've never liked. And now my children are the people that used to bother me. They're the spoiled people with the silver spoon stuck up their ass. And, you know, you just keep hoping. And, you know, I had a thing with Matt the other day. He's like, I said, are you coming to Hawaii? No, we're going to the Breakers after Christmas. I'm like, what are you doing at the Breakers? Just walking around being rich? That kind of turned me off, that he's just going to go down to the Breakers in Palm Beach. I said, but my children have become the very people that I used to look at and go, that's not fair. So what I've done with that is I just hope and pray that they, and I think they have heard me loud and clear. And what I have told them is this thing, the money belongs to God. Don't think this is your money. This luck that's come our way, I don't know why. And I think they've heard it. I hope they've heard it. They certainly talk like they have. So I won't know until I'm dead and looking down to see if they're really doing it. If you have 100 million or 1 billion, you're basically living the same life. I don't like change. I got the same wife. I got the same kids. I got the same friends. All of my money is going to go into a trust, Morgan Family Trust. My daughter is going to run it. And then what I hope to do is to say this is the trust, but I hope to do is to have other silos where my children can put their money inside silos. So I'll have my silo and then their 4 silos, and that we could have money going out for the things that we think are important. I'm not up for trying to start something from scratch. I'm up for, hey, there's a food bank to be built in Appalachia, and then I build it and then I'm done. other than, donations I give. I mean, I still give money to the Morgan Hunger Relief Center, especially now. Look, this new administration, we're losing funding for food at Morgan Hunger Relief Center. So I've stepped up my giving there. I'm 69 years old. I have had more fun and seen more people, and I've met popes. I've met all the presidents. They've all been in my house. I've raised hell. My best time has been in union halls and drinking beer and drinking whiskey and throwing darts. And my children's childhood was unbelievable, and my high school was unbelievable, and my college was unbelievable. Sadly to say, my best days are probably behind me, if I'm being honest. But I got good days ahead of me now, because I got these 6 grandchildren, which has transformed my life, because I'm getting to do it again. And I'm getting to enjoy this innocence and this love. When your grandchildren run into you, there's no love like that. So I got that to look forward to.
Hi, I'm a producer on Unauthorized Account. If you like this video, please subscribe and comment below with more topics that you would like us to cover.
Look at the camera, hold
Yeah.
this, and go.
Okay.